Welcome to the Therapy Show podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard. In each episode, I interview a seasoned and knowledgeable talk therapist from the counseling world to glean valuable insights, techniques, and tools that you can apply to your practice and your life. And if you're considering a career in the counseling field or just want to hear about what it's like to be a talk therapist, then this is the podcast for you. Well, hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. In this week's episode, we are discussing the transformative power of plant medicine. And this week's guest is a very skilled plant medicine healer. However, due to the laws around psychedelics, we are keeping his identity under wraps. So for this episode, his name is Pedro, which he picked after the plant that he works with, the San Pedro cactus. And Pedro shares his personal journey, revealing what drew him to the sacred work of plant medicine. He discusses the various substances and the deep relationships formed during ceremonies. And he also gives you a glimpse into the rituals and experiences. And for a therapist, he's going to offer insights on working with individuals post-experience, emphasizing the importance of containment and allowing the experience to naturally unfold. So I hope you will join us as we journey into the heart of plant medicine. But before we hear from Pedro, I want to share with you a fabulous offer from Therapy Notes. Have you ever felt swamped by endless paperwork and tangled schedules? If so, you are invited to step into a world of clarity with Therapy Notes. Hailed as the gold standard in electronic health records, Therapy Notes is your beacon in the dynamic realm of mental health care. With their round-the-clock 7-day live phone support, it's evident why they shine with a dazzling 4.9 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot.com and Google. From effortless billing to streamlined scheduling, precise note-taking, and state-of-the-art telehealth, Therapy Notes is your all-in-one solution. And for the prescribers among us, they're ecstatic to introduce ePrescribe. Switching lanes from another EHR, they've got your back. They will seamlessly migrate your demographic data at zero cost, ensuring you hit the ground running. So become a part of the 100,000 plus mental health professionals community who've chosen Therapy Notes. To embark on a 2-month complimentary journey, just tap the link in the show notes, or you can use the promo code LISA at checkout at therapynotes.com. So go ahead and dive into the Therapy Notes experience today and see why it's the talk of the town. Navigate with confidence and choose the best. Well, hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and this week's guest is an anonymous guest to a degree. And the reason why this guest is anonymous is because the work that he does with plant medicine is not legal. It's not allowed in the state that we live in. So we are protecting his name. We are protecting what he does. But yet we also want to bring you the information because I sat down with Pedro a few weeks back and he explained to me what he does, how he helps. And I was just fascinated by it. And I was fascinated by his story. And I thought it would be great to let you all in on what he's doing. Now, Pedro, before we dive into the content, I do want you to know that some of my listeners are clinicians and some of my listeners are just people who are interested in talk therapy, who are, clients themselves. So as you're sharing, just, know that you have these two audiences in mind. So we want to cover from both sides, like as much as we can, the clinical side, as well as those who are maybe clients or potential clients of psychotherapy. So we're not using your real name, but if you can, Pedro, can you share with our audience how you found plant medicine? Did something happen in your life that brought you to it?
Sure. That's a big question, Lisa, and I'll try to answer it pretty succinctly.
Okay.
So I've been a teacher for all of my professional life, and when I graduated college, I moved to South Korea and was teaching English there, and then I moved to South America and was teaching English and working with people in Chile. And at that time, I had a lot of substance issues. I was deeply depressed and anxious, though I didn't quite know it. I also had a girlfriend at that time who was living in Germany, and about 8 months into my time in South America, she died suddenly of an embolism in her lung. And on top of all that, I was working about 70 or 80 hours a week. So between overwork, substance abuse, or self-medication, and then this really surprise or tragic death, it put me over the edge. I didn't really have the tools to handle it as a 23-year-old. So in true self-destructive fashion, I said that I was going to travel through as much of South America and do as many drugs as possible. And a friend of mine suggested that you should try this experience, this plant called ayahuasca, which at that time, this is 2012, at that time wasn't nearly in the mainstream as it is now, where you have this is a plant that NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers is famously going to Peru to do, and Joe Rogan is talking about it. It's everywhere, really. So I said, sure, sounds like a big time. So I had signed up for 7 nights or 7 ceremonies, we would say, in 10 days of working with this plant. And so I remember, this is in Peru. So I traveled through Chile and then up to Peru to work with this plant. But for me, it was just to have fun. And I showed up with the 10 or 12 other people who were there to do this experience over the 10 days. And they're talking about spiritual transformation. There were a few former addicts who were in their late 50s who'd come through really challenging addictions, former meth addicts, and thanks to ayahuasca had been healed. And I kind of looked at them with one eyebrow raised and thought, I'll just keep to myself and I'll come here and get high. And then the first few ceremonies were not surprisingly very, very difficult, because these plants are showing, or at least showed me, things that I didn't want to see, that I was running away from, ways that I'd been hurting myself, ways that I'd been hurting other people. And I didn't want to look at that. And so I sat there at night as the shaman or the medicine man is singing songs and making music, and just in knots, physical knots, rolling around on the ground, refusing to get help. So after 3 nights of suffering, the plant said, Pedro, you can continue resisting, you know how that goes, or you can submit. And finally, I was ready to hear it. And so I said, okay, I give up. I stopped fighting. And in that moment, everything changed. I had a major shift in consciousness. I think we might say I touched a spiritual part of myself that I hadn't been open to before then. And that set me off on this path of working with plants, and it's every moment of my life I'm more and more grateful for it.
Dang. Wow. Wow. It's such a interesting story about signing up for 7 nights. The first 3 nights, you were just hoping to get high, but you weren't getting high, I guess. You were sick. Is that right?
Yeah, very,
Okay.
very, very sick. Yeah.
Okay. And so what did the shaman or medicine, I guess, shaman say to you about that?
This retreat, there wasn't a lot of maybe we would say integration of experience.
Okay.
And so this shaman, curandero or healer, he didn't speak English, and there were a few English speaking people who were really putting on the event and facilitating it. But it was there wasn't a lot of translation of experience or individual talking. It was more for people to sit in their own experience and work through things gradually.
Gotcha.
And you can imagine, because I was so closed off to myself, I was also going to be closed off to other people. And so I wouldn't really have been, there probably wasn't a lot that person could have said to me anyway, because I wouldn't have been so open with them about what I was going through.
So you feel like the plant really spoke to you, and that's when you opened on the fourth night?
Definitely, the plant spoke to me, and the plant is bringing up all these types of visions in on a jumbotron screen, things that I couldn't turn away from, but I kept turning away from.
Okay.
But at that time, I was just ready to hear it. I'd suffered enough, and I'd been humbled enough, or was at least, let's say, ready to be humble.
Okay. So talk about what happened after that experience, the next couple of months to the next year or two in your life.
I was very fortunate. So I had been repressing a lot, and suddenly I'd had a huge release. And like I said, a big shift in consciousness. I was fortunate to have no responsibilities as a 23-year-old, uh, nothing, nowhere to go, nothing to do. So I continued to travel throughout to Peru. I was with a friend or I had made a friend there at that experience, at that retreat, and we traveled together. Uh, After a big ayahuasca retreat like that, you often have a dieta, which means there's a lot of energetic and dietary restrictions you have to keep yourself clean because there's a lot of purging that happens. So we were keeping each other honest on that and seeing the country basically for about 2 months. I went deep into the Amazon jungle to do more work with another medicine man. Then one thing, so what the plant had told me when I opened up to it and had this major shift in consciousness, it said, okay, it said three things. It said, Pedro, stop traveling. You're just wandering. Go back to where you went to school, where you went to college. Your best friend lives there. Move in with him and then start writing, which is to say, start creative writing, and everything will take care of itself.
Mm.
Then I proceeded to vomit profusely, and and so I was sort of traveling and through Peru and letting things unfold, enjoying this new being, this lightness that I felt, but with the understanding that okay, I had to go back. Uh, I had to follow these directions. And I let it slowly happen. I moved back in with my father, and he let me live rent free for a few months and read and write. And I did a he works in construction, so I swung a hammer for a little bit and made some money, but there's no pressures at all. And I say I'm fortunate because I work with a lot of people now who go down to Peru or Costa Rica for a week, have sometimes very disruptive experiences, that really shift their paradigm or challenge them to make a lot of changes. And then they have to parachute right back into life, and they have kids,
Right.
or they have a spouse who has expectations on how they need to be. Um, so I didn't have that, and I was able to let the flow of life take me. But I also was a 23-year-old kid who needed to live life. I wasn't ready, let's say, to pour medicine for other people and help people in this way.
Mhm.
I had a lot of living to do, and our early 20s are psychedelic enough. So I I lived. I worked. I started a practice of writing, which the medicine had told me to do. I continued cultivating a yoga and meditation practice and would do that for 2 hours every day for about a decade. I fell in love, went to grad school. Love crumbled apart. Grad school kicked my butt. And then around 2018, as the both of those things were happening, my eyes started to hemorrhage. Not, disconnected from those other factors. And I said, okay, I'm ready to go back and work with the plants. My life is at a critical juncture, and I need some help that I don't know in myself how to help. So I went back to Peru and started working with a different plant, the San Pedro plant, which is where my name comes from for today. I'm not going to call myself San or Saint, but I'll take the Pedro part. So I worked with that plant for a few times over a year, and I felt like I was just after another year and a half, 2 years after grad school. I felt like I was coming to a kind of dead end. I wanted to help people. I wanted to work with people, but teaching was sort of running me dry. And at that point, I decided to take a step back, quit teaching, and go down to Peru and work more seriously with the plants. So I signed up with my teacher for what's called a dieta, where for almost a month, I went without no technology, no reading, no writing, no speaking, no direct eye contact with people, no direct sunlight, no salt, sugar, acid, or fat in my diet, basically just rice and raw vegetables or cooked vegetables. And I drank that plant every day, 2 times a day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a honeymoon,
Right.
put it like
Yeah.
that. It's just you and the plant. And
Hmm.
so you're developing a real trust and intimacy with each other. At the end of that month, the plant said, okay, you're ready. You're going to go back and you're going to pour this medicine in the Colombia area. And I said, okay, my eyes are bad, San Pedro, but maybe my eyes are getting bad. You said Colombia, not, Boulder, not San Francisco, not Colombia. That also would be nice, but I said, no, you have to go back to this area and you're going to pour the medicine. And for me, that was a major shock because I just escaped that place and I didn't have plans to come back. So
Wow.
ever since then, I've come back and I've been pouring this medicine here in this area, also North Carolina, Tennessee, sometimes up in the Northeast where I grew up. And even out Midwest, there's a psychedelic church out there that occasionally we've gone out and done work at. So it's been almost 4 years now that I've been back and doing this work here.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for giving us the background. I still have questions about it. Like I just could go down different trails and, I want to know, like, what did you learn about yourself after a month of doing the medicine every day? But I think what it would be good to do for us now is to pivot into, now that you are a healer yourself, how does that work? How does this ceremony work and who is it for? Like I said, I have all these questions. And how does somebody know if they should give it a try? I'll let you just kind of start where you want.
Sure. Let me sit with that.
Okay.
So how does it work? How does someone know it's right for them? Correct?
Hmm. Correct. Hmm.
So let's give a little bit more context or greater context of how a person might find out about this and what their options are.
Okay.
So a person might read about it online or about plant medicine, about working with these plants. Um, and the plant that I work with, like I said, is San Pedro. Ayahuasca is another plant in our tradition that we work with, this lineage of Peruvian healers that I'm a part of. A couple other plants that people talk about in this arena are what's called bufo, which contains 5-MeO-DMT. DMT is another chemical that's within the ayahuasca plant, which some people isolate and work with. Psilocybin, of course, is an active psychoactive ingredient in magic mushrooms, and that's getting a lot of press here in the United States and a lot of money for research. And that's been decriminalized in some places across the country. So that also there's a lot of information and excitement, as well as unfortunately corporate investment behind that. So and also LSD to a lesser extent. Iboga is a plant that probably not a lot of people have heard of, but comes from African traditions, and that has a lot of interesting research behind it for addictions.
And maybe we should mention MDMA because before we go into any more, because that one is what is being they're in clinical trials right now. I mean, we could do a whole episode on that, but to actually make that a approved medicine. So there's a lot. And I want to just put it out there that like that book by Michael Pollan, I can't think of the name of it. There's a couple of them.
How to Change Your Mind?
Yes,
That
that
one?
one. That I love that book. And I think him writing about it, of course, opens the door for people to learn about, these plant medicines. But so there are lots of different options out there. So I'll let you, I didn't mean to take away from you in your
Oh,
train of thought.
please, please. How to Change Your Mind is a wonderful book, also a Netflix series, and it does.
Mhm.
What's really useful about it is that it gives an important historical understanding of how these things came to be made illegal in the first place,
Right. Yeah.
not necessarily for good reason, and that
Right.
there's a lot of studies being done in the 50s and the 60s, and many clinicians were excited about the potential of these for psychological healing, and suddenly, due to the war and political reasons, these things became illegal.
Right.
So thanks for bringing that up, Lisa.
Mhm.
This is what's out there, and
Mhm.
people are curious about them. So of course, I work in the underground, and how someone finds me is simply by word of mouth. That's hard for someone to find me, but people can can travel to Costa Rica. There are centers, Mexico as well, Jamaica as well, or Peru, South America, or even Europe. I know people who go out to Europe to work with ayahuasca or work with psilocybin. So I think ultimately curiosity is the first reason that someone comes to this, and to a lesser extent, desperation. Uh, I I would much rather work with a desperate person than a curious person, because I think what these plants ask of you is to be humbled, to say that I can't figure this out on my own. This mind is really tearing me apart oftentimes, and I need to accept that there are other forces out there that can care for me, that can support me. And we're also touching back into our great ancestral understanding that plants, animals, stones, spirits, ancestors are alive and well and talking to us if only we'd stop thinking, open up, and receive what they have for us. So, so that's that. But you're talking to a shaman or curandero. I also think that there's great clinical benefit, to working with these plants with less maybe spiritual context. It is a good thing that people are finding these things like the MDMA trials that MAPS is doing. That has real deep value. And so yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Mhm. Yeah.
Help reorient me here.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think that's just part of it. It's like, you know, who is it for? How do you know you should do it? It's a deeply personal decision, and I don't know. I think it's different for everybody when they decide that it's an option that they want to try. And I'm guessing, so when somebody decides that they want to do the ceremony, what's the mindset that they need to have when they just go into this with you?
If they a person needs to be open to receiving and being changed. That's it. I wouldn't condition it any more than that. Of course, there are a lot of things that I would ask a person of, but that openness, um, and to see that they're working with another conscious being, that is the plant, that to me is foremost. And it's a key difference between how I am working with people in a healing context and how you or therapists, clinicians are working with people, is that the primary healing relationship is not me and the person, it's the plant and the person. And my job is to facilitate that in a ceremony, keep the pressure there, keep them concentrated, lying down, receiving. They might close up. And so how can I reorient them? How can I help them to get to open back up and listen or ask questions of the medicine, the plant, I mean.
Okay. I think that's a great way of, I mean, I keep thinking, and I know when you and I met, the thing that really stuck out to me was, in psychotherapy or in talk therapy, change happens because of the relationship. I mean, usually change happens because you're having this like mirrored relationship with somebody. The therapist is holding up a mirror to the patient or client and saying, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I'm hearing. Do you agree? What do you think? You're having like mirrored experience. But with plant medicine, the plant is like working within you and it's showing you things that are probably who knows what, you've stuffed them, maybe you've repressed them, and it's like bringing it up in you viscerally, I'm guessing as well. And then so you're there as a support, as a guide, as a companion almost. Um, do I have that right?
Yeah,
Or somewhat right? Okay.
that's exactly it.
Okay.
Yes. And there's so in a ceremony, and now everyone works slightly differently, but in my ceremony, in my tradition, for example, we wouldn't there's not a lot of, there can be a little bit of talking, especially if a person is really close and it's obvious they need to express something verbally. But in general, what a ceremony looks like is we'll go out to for me, it's often outside in nature, but sometimes it can be in a home. We'll drink the medicine, and then people take their own space. There's no interaction between people who are there in the ceremony. I'm often singing. Songs are very important in our tradition called ikaros, which call in spirits and help move energy. And I'm always available. Someone needs help, is going through something challenging and they need to talk to me, then I'm there in a heartbeat. But for the most part, people are lying down quietly or sitting up or maybe walking around a little bit. If they need to dance, or that's also perfectly acceptable, whatever expression comes up. But that is to say that it's a little bit different maybe than how, for example, in MDMA, there are a lot, according to the MAPS protocol, you have two therapists or clinicians there who are asking questions and helping guide them through, to a certain degree, through an experience. And that's what the plant is doing. Like you're saying, that conversation and that movement is happening internally. And there's energetic shifts and people are releasing emotionally. They're also sometimes releasing physically, so vomiting or pooping. But that's not so common with San Pedro. With ayahuasca, that plant is a purgative, so it's part of the deal, so to speak. And so this experience is much more internal, and they are with San Pedro especially. There's a lot of memories that are coming up. People have past life experiences. People just have emotional releases without any memories at all. But it's much more emotionally psychedelic. There aren't often a lot of visions, but that's also not that's person depending.
Okay.
And the ceremony lasts about 6-7 hours, and then formally we close things up.
Okay. And do you do any type of work after the ceremony with your client?
Sure, and that's paramount.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be so prior to the ceremony, I'll sit down and I'll have a conversation or two with a person. I'll ask them what brings them here, what brings them now to this, why they think this is the time to work with this plant. Then and I would want to build trust with them. They need to trust me so that they can open up fully in the ceremony. There are some physical risks. So we need to make sure, for example, that they don't have any heart issues, that they don't have. I need to ask about their mental health history. They don't have a history of schizophrenia or other severe mental illness. And assuming they don't check any of those boxes, those contraindications, then they can do ceremony. And then whatever they need to know about me, they can ask, because again, it's important that they trust me and the container. After that, we have ceremony. And then post ceremony, the best case scenario, though this doesn't always happen, is everybody who's in ceremony, we have a kind of integration talk the next day or a week later. The lines of communication are always open between me and people I've done work with, so they can text or call at any time. There's really not a boundary there. And also those people who are in ceremony, they get connected to other people who've been in ceremony. And so we try to develop a kind of community that supports people and this way of seeing the world and this way of healing, because it can be challenging for a person. And I know a couple of people who've been interested in plant medicine. They've gone to a different country to do it, and they've had big experiences, and they come back here to the South Carolina area, to a conservative state where people aren't actually open to these experiences, and they suddenly feel very, very alone. So not to have a community to support them, well, as we know or are finding out, that the community is really everything. So that's the ideal, and what I'm trying to build here in this area as the years go on.
Okay. So I know you mentioned that a lot of people say yes, they're interested in doing it, but then they back out kind of last minute. Do you have any ideas why they do that or what that's about?
Well, Lisa, you probably see that where people show up for 1 or 2 sessions and then they stop coming.
Right.
What are your intuitions on why that happens?
They're just not ready.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
part of them was intrigued, wanted to try, but a more predominant part
Mm-hmm.
would rather not
Yeah.
go there.
Right. Interesting. Parts. It's all about our parts. Okay, so let's talk to my clinician friends, my therapist friends who have a client who has decided that they want to have a ceremony, what does that therapist need to know?
So before the ceremony,
Mm-hmm.
in other words, what do they need to know?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that? Like, what do they need to know
Yeah, so
about their client or about the experience?
I think
Which,
about let me back it up and say that there are going to be therapists out there that are like, yeah, I'm all for it. People do what they need to do. They got to have, it's their life, you know. And then you have some therapists that are going to be like, no, do not do it. This is not advised. There's no, you know, it's not legal in our state. You know, I've heard all these things about what happens to people who do, you know, there's going to be all kinds of therapists out there on the spectrum of, you know, what they know about plant medicine. So let's say that you're a therapist and you know, you're open to your client, you know, doing what they want to do. It's their life. And you're, you know, you don't see any potential harm coming from it, as in there's no major mental health like schizophrenia or, you know, you feel like they are in an okay place. They could go and try it. Maybe they're medication, they're resistant to medication. It's just not working. You're kind of like, this therapist is like, all right, we'll try it, you know, try anything at this point. What does a therapist need to know about their client after the ceremony? I guess would be the better question. Or, I mean, I have a lot of questions. Like, as a therapist, I would want to know, like, who are you going to go be doing this with? Because I'm thinking about the safety of my client. I'm also thinking, like, do you know what the possible side effects are? You know, I'm thinking all the safety stuff more than anything. So yeah, I'll just stop talking and kind of let you. What do you think about what I've just said?
yeah, as you explain, I kind of have this feeling of a parent asking their kid, their
Yeah.
teenager, like, whose house are you going to? You know, are
Right.
their parents there?
Right. Yeah. That's kind of how it feels, maybe. But maybe that's my own stuff coming out, Pedro. Which really brings up the mirror of, well, how do I see myself as a therapist if I'm asking these questions? Am I acting like a parent? That's a really good point, you know? Really good point.
Yeah, how attached are you to your
Right.
client's process?
Exactly. I got my own work
And
to
it,
do.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but so it is, there are certainly psychological aspects and healing that comes up in a
Hmm.
ceremony, and there's also a deeper spiritual healing. I mean, you and I share, we're in different lanes, um, but we also share a sort of lane at the same time.
Hmm.
Just like in therapy work, of course, there's a spiritual aspect. It's not just psychological.
Right.
So it does make sense you'd have some concern about seeing your client go do this work, and also excitement
Hmm.
because it's a potential major opening.
Hmm.
So what I would like, I hope, I want people to ask me about me. I want a person to be curious. I think it's important that you really trust the medicine person. So if I were a therapist, I would ask my client, you know, ask them about their life, ask them about their medicine path, ask them about how long they've been doing this. Experience matters.
Hmm.
Also, how did you find this person? I would ask you, do you know other people who have worked with that person? You know, again, referrals, just
Right.
like you would sort of rely on when you're finding a good therapist
Hmm.
or doctor. And I, so those are some important things to consider. The medical aspect is that is also important. And I would like, ideally, the person who's doing this ceremony, you would want, like I was explaining, there to be a before and after, you know, a pre and a post conversation or integration to make sure that this work continues rather than, okay, you just do once, you do an experience with this person, you know, you do mushrooms or San Pedro or ayahuasca, and then that's it. They never talk to that person again. It's hard to, it's hard to really have a meaningful, lasting change if you don't have that relationship. So that's what I would be curious about going in if I'm working with if I were a therapist working with a client going into the experience. And I would also, most importantly, if I were a therapist talking to a person, a client, I would want them to talk a lot about their expectations and
Hmm.
do their best to leave those at the door, because that can really get in the way of a person's experience in ceremony. If
Okay.
they're coming in thinking that they're going to get major psychological change or spiritual change, that puts a lot of pressure on that ceremony, and that's not a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes time. I'm just thinking
Hmm.
about the therapeutic process. Like a lot of people come in and they just want, okay, tell me what to do, fix me right now. And it's, oh, if it were that easy, you know? So,
Amen.
yeah, right. I mean, I wish it was that easy. If I had a wand and I could just wave it, I always joke around and say I'd be a millionaire at this point. And I tell people that too when they come in and they say that, and they say, "Oh gosh, let me find my change everything in your life wand." Not really, but depending on, of course, the person and the relationship and sense of humor. But I do. It's very similar, yet different. Kind of like you said, we're in different lanes, but we have the same hope and mission to help people heal, and we're trained in different ways of doing that. And I just find this fascinating. Have you ever? I just had this. Well, you were talking. I wanted to ask you: have you ever gone with someone who's come to your ceremony, ask you to go with them to their therapist?
No.
I would be all over
No.
that. I'd be like, bring your healer in. Will they come or can we get them on the phone? I would love that.
Is that yeah, I'm trying to think now. I have had that's once. So I have there was a person who their their therapist wanted to meet me to double check that this person is of integrity,
Hmm.
and this was a person who had a history of sexual abuse and a lot of trust issues with
Sure.
men.
Yeah.
So it made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Um, but otherwise, I think it's really important that we are in separate lanes and we respect each other in those lanes.
Hmm.
So I'm grateful when my people who come to me also have therapists. And because we can better serve that person. You know, I would not. I'm no one's therapist. That's not my role. That's not the role that I play. So it's important that they don't that they keep the relationships and the trust that they have in their respective medical professionals or healing professionals.
And I know that when you and I met a few weeks back, you mentioned that oftentimes you will, that you follow up with those who come to you for the plant medicine. Um, and you just go, you'll meet them in their homes, or you'll meet them where they're comfortable meeting. What what are those kind of sessions like? Do you have an agenda going? I'm guessing you don't, but like, do you have like a follow-up plan or an agenda that I'm just using that word as the first thing that comes to mind. Like when you meet with them.
They they all go about the same.
Mhm.
Lisa, I ask that question of what brings you here? And often they talk for 20-25 minutes. Ultimately, they want to be heard.
Yeah.
As people who come into a therapeutic setting, they're dealing with a lot and they just get to express. And I continue to listen and ask questions that helps them express more deeply and deeply. I'm trying to I'm trying to help the opening up. This is the first ceremony has begun once we have that conversation because they're already starting to open, and the giving the medicine, I as a kind of emissary of the medicine or the plant, am already starting to get to do that work. So it's mostly them talking, and after they get to express what's been coming up for them, what's been going on, their history, what brings them to this, their experience with psychedelics or plant medicines, then they really say like, well, I don't have a lot of questions for you, Pedro. I think I'm ready to go.
Okay.
That's sweet.
Awesome. Okay. Well, this has just been an awesome conversation. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know about the plants, about how you help? Anything?
Uh, yeah, I'll say that, I this is a really challenging and beautiful way of healing, and it's not for everybody. And so I don't want to come here and have have people leave with the belief that I think this is the answer for everyone, because it's not.
Okay.
And it does ask a person to really come into their body and feel things that have been long repressed. And that's incredibly challenging, especially for people who have maybe grown up and lived a type of life in a culture that encourages that type of repression. So it is it's a beautiful and humbling thing to get to see, to witness people have those experiences and open up and release, and it's very hard earned.
Yeah.
So so I do, I guess I want to end by saying that, and I do think that the type of work that's being done, like with MAPS and the clinical use of MDMA and psilocybin, that's a bridge to me. You know, some people who aren't maybe ready to come with a strange shaman out into the wilderness and take this plant, that's a bridge too far, so to speak, and they feel safer in those clinical settings, then excellent.
Mhm.
Excellent. And then we can have more immersive and deeper experiences that have more spiritual context than the clinical context. So that's my perspective on how I hope that the landscape changes here in the years ahead.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. And I'm grateful for you and the work that you're doing and how you're helping so many people. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the future for those who are open and ready to give it a try.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for your time here, Lisa, and having opening this space for us to talk. I hope it was beneficial for your listeners.
Yeah, I hope so too. I really do. I hope that they found this insightful, educational. Is there like a website? Not that they can go and find you, of course, but like, is there a website that they can just learn about plant medicine? Like, is there a educational website out there at all about plant medicine that you would recommend? And if you say no, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Sure. My suggestion, I think Michael Pollan's book is a good introduction to for people who know very, very little
Mhm.
or nothing at all. And beyond that, I think one has to let their curiosity lead them. There are all types of opportunities abroad, but even domestically, to work with these plants, and you're attracted to certain places for a reason, and you can trust that as long as those places seem to be doing it with integrity and are giving back to communities and not just boutique capitalistic endeavors.
Mhm.
But there's not a great catch-all resource to guide people how to do this. I think your friends, ask people. You know, that's the best resource I have, and be led by people that you trust, like anything.
Okay, great. Great advice. All right. Well, thanks again for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks to you, Lisa.
You're welcome. It's important to stress that these episodes are not meant to take the place of any work you're doing with your therapist or doctor. In fact, please run these ideas by your counselor or doctor before you act on them to make sure you are ready for them or even a fit for these suggestions. I can't stress this enough that each person is unique and their situation is unique. So please talk to your doctor before starting anything new that we might be suggesting in any of our episodes. The Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard and the information provided by Lisa and her guests is solely intended for informational and entertainment purposes and is not a substitute for advice, diagnosis, or treatment regarding medical or mental health concerns. Although Lisa is a licensed marriage and family therapist, the views expressed on the site, on the podcast, or any related content should not be taken for medical or psychiatric advice. Always consult your physician before making any decisions related to your physical or mental health. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Pedro. And before we end today, I want to remind you of that amazing offer from Therapy Notes. You can get a 2-month complimentary journey. Just tap the link in the show notes or use the promo code Lisa at checkout at therapynotes.com. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Therapy Show with Lisa Mustard. I know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and I'm thankful you've chosen to listen to mine.
Be sure to visit lisamustard.com to access the show notes and discover more fantastic content.
And I'd be grateful if you subscribe to the show. Thank you.